American Giant makes great clothing, sweatshirts, jeans, and more right here in the U.S. Visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order with code STAPLE20. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com, code STAPLE20.
These days, work is in trouble. We've outsourced most of our manufacturing to other countries. And with that, we sent away good jobs and our capability to make things. American Giant is a clothing company that's pushing back against this tide. They make all kinds of high-quality clothing and activewear, like sweatshirts, jeans, dresses, jackets, and so much more, right here in the USA. So when you buy American Giant, you create jobs in towns and cities across the country. And jobs bring pride, purpose. They stitch people together. If all that sounds good to you, visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code STAPLE20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com with promo code STAPLE20.
Get ready for the Ochelli effect.
October 2, 2024, allegedly, according to that thing we call a calendar. This is the Ochelli effect. It is a Woden's Day as I speak to you. Wednesday, middle of the week. That's right. And oddly enough, yesterday, when it was Tuesday, Tears Day, the second day of the week, when you start counting from Monday and all that good stuff, broadcast days, I should have been broadcasting. However, somehow, stupidly, I thought all day that it was Monday. So I missed yesterday's broadcast. We got a bunch of things to cram in for this week to finish it out, and I'm going to be broadcasting every day in some way, shape, or form, broadcasting and recording every single day, multiple shows, guys, from now until Sunday, all the way when we break into Monday where I'm sitting. Okay, so a lot of shows. I don't know, there's like 8 or 9 shows altogether that are going to be produced in the next 1, 2, 3, 4 full days, and now. Okay, so get ready for it. It's not going to be filler either. Tonight we're going to start off right away with Larry Hancock, the author of a great many books on my shelf, including Someone Would Have Talked, including, Nexus, including... There are many. Tipping Point, great one to point out. And, I thought maybe Larry was done writing about the JFK assassination, but we've got something else. And available for pre-order right now is indeed the Oswald Puzzle. That is co-authored by Larry Hancock and David Boylan. I always mess that up. Boylan. He said it's fine when I pronounced it that way. I have a feeling it's not. But who knows? Maybe he's used to it, or maybe he's just now so accustomed to it he accepts all pronunciations. But anyway, that's his co-author on this one, Oswald Puzzle. Okay? And let's see, is that exactly? I have a link right here, which I'm going to give to you guys in the chats. And also, any place else you ask for it, I'll give you the link because you can pre-order it now as we speak. So it'll go into the live chat room at Ochelli.com, and you guys will see that and know that A, I was broadcasting live, even if you roll it back later, and B, that you can go and get the book now, and I already know it's going to be something good. We've been talking for months with Larry about this reevaluation, reexamination, another sort of look at the historical figure that is Lee Harvey Oswald because of the evolution of actual solid evidence, other information streams, and who knows, maybe even the shift, let's say, in prejudices and biases which might have existed, no offense to Larry, but in his work and other researchers' work previously, because there was just so many missing pieces to the puzzle, right? There were so many pieces that needed to be added, and maybe a few that needed to be subtracted. Okay? I mean, it's just that simple. And I'm trying to go to it right away to see if I can pick it up. And it's funny. Let's see if we can get it directly. But I think I have the link already posted in the Ochelli chat room. And I do want to copy that link and see if I can get it again and run it straight away through my browser, and yes, indeed, Oswald Puzzle, hardcover. It says it's going to be released January 14, 2025, and Larry Joe Hancock is the author. David Boylan is also the author. All of that listed, pre-order price guaranteed, and all that good stuff through Amazon.com. So let's see. Let's just make sure, again, that we post it correctly in the live Ochelli chat room. But those of you that hear this via podcast later on, it will be included in the show notes. So with all that aside, and all of the previous mentions and previous podcasts for many years now, I've done shows with Larry Hancock, gratefully, proudly, including a 101 series to give people an idea about the official and maybe somewhat, in occasion, slightly less than official, investigations. That's the word I was searching for. Odd. Anyway, the investigations that took place, we gave you a 101 on that. We started a 201 series, dropped it there because it was seemingly like you needed to go do the research after that. We did an entire series devoted to the Larry Hancock collection, which has now been added to since then. Not only this book, but a couple other pieces. Meanwhile, he's written about a few other topics outside of the JFK assassination that are all interlinked to what? The behaviors, procedures, and activities of mostly the intelligence agencies, but through the lenses of political influence, the spheres thereof, the public knowledge, examining many, many things in context on this show to give you just a hint of all the information very carefully researched and presented by Larry Hancock, some other co-authors, including Stu Wexler, on other books. And indeed, he's touched upon the Martin Luther King Jr. assassination, the Robert F. Kennedy assassination, the John F. Kennedy assassination, the thing that we have now come accustomed to call UAPs instead of UFOs through a book called Unidentified, and another piece of contextual history, creating chaos. Heavy focus on, Russia, the Soviet Union, for sure, but there were other things going on there, and we had to talk about that due to the links of Putin and his recent need to be discussed in mainstream media, his actions, the current conflict in Ukraine, all of that, and the past history, plus the links to various other topics. It was necessary to discuss that, but also Larry covers the U.S. and other individuals creating chaos, so to speak, on the globe. Plus, in denial. How about the way that, the supposedly less than publicly observed actions of various agencies and military operations took place, and exactly how covert operations function for better or worse at different time periods. Why other nations had more success than, we, the proverbial we, did in recent history. Look, I just tried to capsulize it all, and I can't do it. But if you go to larry-hancock.com, you can not only follow Larry's blog and his most recent pieces of work, but you can roll it back and learn more from Larry Hancock than you can from, just about any sort of collegiate experience you might have in a class that's supposed to focus on modern contemporary history, the intelligence agencies, and how, political, psychological, and indeed covert warfare are conducted on the planet. I don't think you're going to find a class or even a set of classes that'll handle it as well as Larry Hancock has throughout the years and the many volumes that he has written. And by the way, I recommend all of them, one way or another. Depends on which point of entry you want to travel when it comes into getting into this topic. And the stuff is written so that an academic can certainly learn from it, so that a higher education can get value out of it, but it's also accessible and understood if you are willing to dive into the complex pool that Larry has by doing his research, by investigating things, by revealing documentation, etc., etc., etc. Larry-Hancock.com, like I said, follow his work, follow him there. But also, you could follow him throughout the years on the Ochelli Effect. So now that I'm done with that very long, arduous, introduction, Larry, sorry, I know I'm long-winded, but how are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing fine, and that introduction kind of reminded me why at one point I decided I was done and would not need to write another book. But okay, I did get over that. But I'm doing fine. We're still working with the publisher, getting the things wrapped up. I think, as we talked about, we are adding a fairly large photo section to the book, and believe it or not, that's led to some more insights about Oswald. We've actually learned some things with those photos, but we've also learned that getting photo rights for book publication is a challenge unto itself. Still very much involved with getting the book's written, now involved in getting it out.
Well, the book's written. It is available again for pre-sale at Amazon, and certainly going to remind people as to where they can get that a few times. But again, in the show notes with the podcast, et cetera, you will see it there. But Larry, how about we start with the photos then, which is an odd place to begin. This is kind of unique. I mean, you've had photos in other books that you have written for sure. You've certainly released other interesting photographic pieces before. But tell me, what is going on here with the added challenge? And could you give us a hint, or at least one of those new pieces of information that you gathered from this process of, getting authorization to reprint, to use, etc., these photographic pieces? Could you give us, I don't know, an anecdote or two about this to take a snapshot?
Well, I think one of the things that is different in previous books, sure, we had pictures of people, but we weren't really doing what we're doing in this book. In this book, we're telling Oswald's story. This is very much a picture of Oswald as an individual, Oswald as a character, the development of Lee Harvey Oswald, issues of continuity and his activities and his agendas. So it's a very personal story. So, it's just...
Here in America, work is in trouble. We've offshored our manufacturing, sent away good jobs, and lost so much ability to make things. American Giant is a company that's pushing back against this tide. They make high-quality clothing, sweatshirts, jeans, dresses, jackets, and so much more right here in the USA. Visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code STAPLE20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com, promo code STAPLE20.
In other books, we might have shown one picture of a David Phillips or, a different CI officer or, even in the King books. Yeah, we had some crime scene photos in the King books. But this is a different kind of book because it's a very personal book about an individual. And so for this book, we have to deal with this individual's life history. We have to capture it in a way that, for example, the Warren Commission did not. I mean, everyone who's familiar with the JFK assassination was imprinted by Life magazine,
right, and
by the cover photo of Life magazine with Lee Harvey Oswald holding a rifle and wearing a pistol and a pistol belt. That imprinted everyone, starting right after the assassination and for decades. This is the image of Lee Harvey Oswald. Obviously, potentially a violent person, guy who can be expected to have shot the president. That established a perception of Lee Harvey Oswald. What we needed to do is go back and show the pictures that the Warren Commission had, some of them, of Lee Harvey Oswald as an individual. Pictures of Lee Harvey Oswald as a child, as a teenager, as a Marine, inside Russia.
Right. Now, let me interrupt.
Very important pictures. So, from a developmental standpoint, not that some of those pictures have not appeared before, but presenting them in a chronological fashion to support the story is much different than we've done in any other book that I've been involved with.
That you've been involved with. Right. So what I was going to point out is that obviously, like a book like Robert Groden's In Search of Lee Harvey Oswald, which I have no problem adding a plug to here. I think it's one of the essential pieces of reference if you want a physical reference book in your hands. From a photographic standpoint, it gives you a great deal of reference when it comes to Oswald. and it gives you a lot of stuff that wasn't seen elsewhere. Now, there is the expose aspect of this, and you can show many fascinating things in other books, in other ways, etc. Much like in a film, a motion picture way, for probably 3 decades, the one film that was taken by the U.S. government as a documentary of those last 3 days, right, or those last 2 days, whatever it was, in Dallas, was, whether people knew it or not, injected into nearly every single motion picture documentary, in even theatrical films. If the Kennedy assassination was mentioned, if it was meant to be shown in a photographic way, there were 2 guarantees that you had in the world of documentaries and films. And the one guarantee was the use of that film by the U.S. government, and the other was the still shot, which came from Mary Moorman. Those 2 things were guaranteed images, no matter what direction you went in. If you were a Warren Commission supporter, if the whole point of it was to say Russia did it, it didn't matter what direction you were coming from. These things were universally inserted. So they became part of the overall image. And that happened because of the publication in a lot of books. A lot of stills became absolutely associated to XYZ, etc. Like Lee Harvey Oswald's mugshot is probably one of the most famous mugshots in the world, right? Even though we've seen many other celebrities, many other people of note or notoriety or notorious, right, notoriety, one way or the other, we've seen a lot of their mugshots, but that mugshot was just universal. It was there everywhere. Now, that in mind, there is a big difference between utilizing the pictures to do something, to tell a story, to actually weave through a narrative, or to create one with the pictures. There's a big difference between doing that and simply attaching them, simply continuing on and showing continuity in a way with that universe, let's say, of media. And I think a lot of people's books have wasted time, you know, and not yours necessarily, not anybody by name, but I will say a lot of people have wasted time simply attaching things that you've already seen elsewhere, one way or another, and it's been done in a haphazard fashion. In some cases, people drew their own conclusions from images that were printed here, there, the other place. And in other cases, people had to go and search things out and say, oh, look, in Jesse Curry's book, this part isn't redacted from a photo, which everywhere else it is, stuff like that happened. But for the most part, people were attaching photos without utilizing them in and of themselves to do a job. What it sounds like to me you've done is very thoughtfully created a photographic section which actually serves purposes, plural. And in some cases it might be to show people something brand new. But it's never that simple. It's not just, I have a couple of pictures in here that are really important and brand new. Because believe it or not, there was a time when I used to purchase books simply because I wanted that new picture that wasn't available anywhere else. And I would have to suffer through or sit there and ignore the text of a book because I simply wanted the photo section. I mean, that's the truth about a couple of books I purchased in my life. I simply wanted to look at this thing, access it, find out, is there a credit given for it? Where could I obtain a copy of this thing? And in some cases, I would literally physically buy a book simply so I had it and I could examine what they had, determine what generation it was, etc., etc. Stuff like that I used to have to do, but not because these pictures told a story, but because the pictures in and of themselves may or may not have been relevant to something that could be investigated. So what you're telling me is you're not giving me the needle, the haystacks, and no map. You're actually providing us with a photo section that serves multiple purposes. Is that right?
Yeah, and it has to be in a developmental fashion. Man, to treat Oswald as a unique individual, we have to develop him, and we have to watch, his agenda develop, and we can see that, we can write about it, but we can see it better if we see some examples of what's going on with him at a given time. 2 or 3 examples of this. in 1962, 1963, there's always been a lot of speculation of, well, it's clear that Oswald was making copies of things at work. He was developing his photographic skills while he was working at Jagger-Stoffel. Is that suspicious? Why was he doing that? Why did he? Why was this important to him? Is this like some kind of training as a spy? Well, he already was in Russia. What's going on with that? Well, it makes much more sense when you can show letters that are written to Oswald from the people that he was sending the materials that he was developing those skills for. When you see a letter from the worker saying, "Dear Mr. Oswald, thank you for sending us copies of this, this, and this. Your photographic work is great. We appreciate your volunteering." That makes some sense out of what's going on with Oswald at that point in time.
Right.
It's very, very important. Another thing, we often, and we couldn't put all the pictures that were of interest in, of course. We're limited, but we often don't see the other side of Oswald. I've now seen, by looking at photo collections, pictures or letters written to him after his return from the Soviet Union that were actually positive. Like, oh, people are saying you're a traitor. I don't believe that. I believe that you went there for a reason, and I believe Americans should be able to travel where they want to. Oswald did get reinforcement. We don't ever talk about or see that. And in the spring of 1963, we talk about the fact that, you can see how his beliefs are developing. He was actually invited to speak as a Jesuit training school.
Right.
And he went and delivered a presentation. We've all known that. We've talked about it happening. In the book, we show you a picture of one of several thank you letters that were written to him by people who listen to that speech that elaborate on what they learned from him, their positive reactions to him. Again, Oswald was not a loner. Oswald was interacting with people. He was actually reaching out, and he was getting feedback as his own personal agenda developed. And that kind of gives you a sense of what's going on with him. But, when you talk about those things piecemeal, it's different than when you see them in a developmental series in the book.
Well, right, and I think there's also the personal aspect, which is often missing because people ascribe a certain personality to him, and then they are stuck trying to stick to that. I think in some cases, he could be producing photos not only to seek out that positive reinforcement, but to interact with some of those people. Sure, you love those pictures, I'll send you some more. He might have also started to ascribe importance to certain things, because people have asked questions about what it is he chose to retain and, and stuff like that over the years, and there have been weird statements about it. Well, he kept this because operationally, not necessarily. It may have been.
Chuck, I hate to break in, but I got to tell you, that's what we learned by going through the photo section. Oswald kept everything.
If
he got a receipt for a subscription, Oswald was a pack rat.
Right.
If anybody thinks that he was selective in what he collected, no. It's amazing what you find in the materials taken from his private possessions, the kind of junk stuff he retained. It's like everything, every piece of paper, it's all there. So I had not fully realized that until I started looking at, again, samples of that the Dallas police had collected, receipts and copies of his, tax payments and copies of this and that, and it's amazing.
Receipts.
You see his reading material.
Even
everybody
receipts.
we don't know what Oswald really thought. Yeah, if you look at all the stuff he was reading, he kept it all. As a matter of fact, apparently he made sure that when he went to Russia, he left it in a place where he could retrieve it when he got back.
That's right.
Photos. He a huge photo collection. Guy had a photo album. They didn't even have time to photo everything. They took dozens and dozens of individual photos and then a shot of his photo album. It's really, I had not really appreciated his his pack rat nature and the fact that he constantly took photos. We think of the backyard photos and maybe seen something unusual and anomalous. No, he took photos all the time.
Yeah, he actually had an honest interest in photography, and again, that is way different than what somebody who has an interest in photography would take today. And even if you wind back 30 years, that's a whole different animal from now, and also from his time period. They didn't have the Kodak disc, you know what I'm saying, in the 1960s. They didn't have, the disposable cameras like we had for a while. When film was still a thing. When was the last time you knew somebody to actually take film to, remember this was a thing for about, 20 years? Taking your film to the pharmacy was commonplace in a lot of places because cheap cameras were everywhere. No, there was a point at which you had to have either an expensive camera or you had to very much take care of some weird little thing that did produce photos. But either way, your interest in photography was easily seen in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s based on what you had and what you were willing to use. Now, on top of that, if he did something and caught something photographically that he thought was significant, he would make multiple copies. See, that's what I see with the, was he using, his machines at work to do stuff? And, well, maybe he was, and not because it was secret work and this and that, but because he was kind of a cheapskate, too. That's something I've heard from many people that knew him, that he didn't really, if he could figure out a way to not spend some money, to be frugal, he definitely did it. So I'm thinking to myself, just like people did when, copy machines were a big deal, a lot of people used to go to work and have a copy machine at work and you didn't have one at home. They weren't something that was usually at home. A lot of people would make copies at work. And, just the copy machine, just to make a paper copies. Oh, I need to make copies. I'm going to have to go find a place that makes copies. That used to be a thing, folks. And they would go, no, I'll take care of it. I have a copy machine at work. And then they started, and really people got fired over this and all kinds of things. Overuse of the copy machine, whether it was making flyers for your kid's school event or it was something else, you would get told, oh, you cannot use this for personal use. That was a thing. And that was just photo. That was like the copies of things on paper. When you had access to photographic copies, well, I knew people that did that too. And believe me, they would figure out ways to get free photo prints and extra sets of prints sent to people or to themselves. There's a whole thing that goes on here. And Mr. Cheapskate, if he could figure out a way to kind of do it, not get in trouble, maybe he did, I don't know. I've never looked at those work records because I don't think anybody has gotten them entirely, have they?
He did not get in trouble.
Okay, I didn't know.
That's not what. As a matter of fact, and I think it's important to point out, he made himself fairly skilled. And if you want to talk about how history might have changed, when he came back to Dallas in the fall of 1963, the first thing he did when he got back to Dallas is started applying for jobs.
Right.
All over the place. And he actually, we have the documents that show when he had gone to Mexico City, he listed his occupation as photographer.
Right.
When he came back, one of the first things he did was to apply at other photographic processing houses like Jagger Stovall. Mm-hmm. And I've sent there's a copy of a letter. They were interested. He had a job offer. They wanted to hire him. And just on his bad luck, the manager that wanted to hire him called Jaggers on a work reference he had listed, and happened that day to get the manager who was in, and the manager said, well, his work was fine, except, he made people nervous sometimes here because he spoke Russian, and they didn't hire him. Think what have happened if that manager had just hired Lee Harvey Oswald into a photo processing plant again in Dallas in, November 1963.
Right. We certainly wouldn't have time, ostensibly off the top of my head, probably wouldn't have time to go refinishing floors at the school book depository. You know what I mean? Which is his original work thing was he was brought over there temporarily, right? In order to help finish the floors, if I remember correctly. That was one of the main jobs.
Actually, and then they had assigned some of the longer term workers there to do the floors, and he was brought in temporarily until they finished the floors to do the route, because they wanted to retain those guys. They were long-term employees, and I think they probably trusted them a little bit more. They had worked in both buildings, but he was kind of a temporary slot as a book filler while they were working on the flooring.
Well, I know it was brought up while he was being hired that was one of the reasons for it, right? That they needed extra people because of this redoing the floors.
Yeah.
And then, they did make him an order. I'm not saying that's all he started at. I'm just saying that seems to me like he wouldn't have time for that if he had gotten a job in the photographic field where they also would have paid him more. No?
Oh, yeah. And that's the kind of job he wanted. He wouldn't have been looking for more jobs. We know that in November he was looking for other jobs. He interviewed for other jobs. But again, just to get back to basically the 2 points. Oswald, what we try to do in the book is give the picture of Oswald that the Warren Commission. The Warren Commission had much of this information.
Right.
It just didn't match the message that they want to deliver. Mm-hmm. So the characterization of Oswald, we face the fact that there are two contra characterizations of Oswald. One by the Warren Commission that wants to present him in a certain way. Mm-hmm. Another within the conspiracy community, which has kind of got its own ways of presenting everything he does as being suspicious. Nobody really has dealt with Lee Oswald as just, okay, this is Lee Harvey Oswald. This is his character, this is his development, this is his agenda, not anybody else's agenda. How do we know that? Well, you can see that when you start looking at his correspondence, when you start looking at his possessions, his job application, and long story short. But that's one of the reasons. The photo section in the book is to present Oswald in a way that the Warren Commission did not, and could have. They intentionally avoided a real life picture of Lee Harvey Oswald.
Right, and as you very fairly stated, okay, let's be extremely fair here. It's not just the Warren Commission and the official explanations that seized upon a particular either agenda or type of agenda to move forward with, really, truly not examining things from the point of view that we kind of all wish they would have, in a perfect world, an open investigation, something that, goes after this from all angles. Let's let the information build the narrative as opposed to building a prosecutor's brief and then filling in the blanks, which it very much seems like they did. So let's look at your table of contents, okay? And I think what's fascinating here as I look at it is that this was a very intentional outline that allows us to do precisely what you're talking about, which is step back. Yes, we can use all that information, most likely, or not all of it, but maybe a whole lot of it, that was developed by people that had agendas. But let's temper this properly and go at it from the terms like I'm going to read off to everybody. If you don't mind, I'd like to, in an uninterrupted way, read off the chapters here that you've given me in a list and not even really break them up, just pause and give people an idea of what the overall narrative that is being built here is. Would that be okay with you?
Oh, yeah. And one thing that will do, Chuck, is clearly show that this is actually two books in one. Mm-hmm. The first book is Lee Harvey Oswald, and the second book is Lee Harvey Oswald on November 22nd.
Ah, okay. So really, we begin anew when the chapter actually says November 22nd / alternative views. Is that right?
That would be it.
Okay. Now, just one quick question before I read this off, and I do want to read it off uninterrupted as best I can. I won't even interrupt myself, which I am likely to do on occasion. But before I do that, does the photo section cover the entirety of this two-book format, or is it really focused in one area in particular, or what?
The photo section, it's broken into two parts. One is the first section is Lee Harvey Oswald, basically before Dallas. Mm-hmm. In other words, Lee Harvey Oswald is as a child, as a teenager, in the Marines, in Russia. This is Lee Harvey Oswald up to, his return to the United States. And that it ends with he and Marina and baby June coming back to the United States. The second section is Lee Harvey Oswald essentially in 1962 and 1963. What's going on with him specifically during that time period, as the best we can. That does extend into, what was he doing in the spring? What happens at the time of his arrest? But it's not a book about the assassination per se. It is a book about Lee Harvey Oswald, covering what happened to him on November 22nd, quite frankly, through his death and funeral. So, 2 sections.
Okay. Well, to be honest with you, Larry, I personally, because of that photo section, would break it into 3. And I'll tell you why. Because the transitional time here, when you get up to him returning and him returning with Marina, it seems to me as though that could end the story there. But then we have, what you call a turn to activism, and I'm going to read all these chapters in a row and give people an idea of the overall singular narrative. But it seems like if you break there and then keep what's there until we get to November 22nd, it almost seems like 3 sections is appropriate. What are your thoughts?
Too late, it's already at the publisher.
Yeah, it's already at the publisher, but I'm just asking you, could one not? Hey, look.
There aren't actually enough pictures. Quite frankly, unless you decide to go into all of the pictures that we all know so well from the assassination itself. Mm-hmm. And we feel people have seen that. We're not dealing with the shooting of the president. So we're looking at pictures of just Lee Harvey Oswald.
Well, believe it or not, because believe it or not, I think if you just take a look at the illustrations of Groden's book and you line this up, now I haven't seen the photo section, by the way, guys, so I would like to see it, but it almost feels like to me I could break this into 3 sections myself at home. I have the book now, I can do with what I want. I can break it into 3 sections and just take out my trusty copy of In Search of Lee Harvey Oswald by Robert Groden and lay his pictures, not necessarily his text, but his photographs alongside of this, and I might be able to fill in the blanks. What do you think of that?
That you could. That reminds me of the Christmas that I spent taking the book about photographs of that day in Dallas. Mm-hmm. Very, very expensive hardbound book, and cutting it apart to resequence everything until I understood the motorcade. Mm-hmm. And my wife came out and went, "Didn't you just pay $40 for that book that you're now cutting apart?" And I went, "Yes, dear. Maybe I should just go wrap your present." So I can picture doing that, Chuck. I really can.
Larry, it sounds like you and I had a similar Christmas once, except my book was $50 instead of $40, and my horrified wife? My horrified girlfriend at the time was sitting there saying, "You bought 2 copies of this for that reason?" So you changed that story a little bit. You and I did the same thing. Seriously, I took, and I'm not going to name the book, but yeah.
So you can do it this time too.
Yeah.
Feel free to buy 2 copies, no problem.
So maybe I'll buy 2 copies of Larry's physical book, and I'll reshape it. But let's give you the overall singular narrative as laid out in the book. And once you have it to yourself, you could do it digitally on a computer, or you could do it by hand with a razor blade like I did. Or did you use the whole razor blade kind of thing and do that, Larry? Or
no, I think I just had a good set of scissors.
Good pair of scissors. Either way, it works. And then you just cut and paste yourself. And then your only problem becomes when they have things on 2 sides. And then you got to sit there and go, well, is it primarily the thing on this side or this side that I want to make sure I have? And that becomes your only difficulty. And then you say to yourself, can I afford a 3rd copy? So anyway. All of that fun aside, and by the way, we encourage you 2-3 copies of this. Go right ahead, cut them up, rearrange them, and show people when they come to your house. This is my reformulated version of Larry's book. And I can also point you to a place to get a cheap copy of Groden's older book. So if you wanted to, you could intersperse this and create this unique thing. Anyway, now that I've given people an arts and crafts project, Larry, let's get to the narrative, the arts and crafts project that you've actually provided to all of us here to mentally reassemble, re-edit, almost like the Jeffersonian Bible, where he recut the Bible. I'm thinking of, historically. It's interesting, recutting it, but don't recut it until you've actually gone through it first. And here's why. The book chapters are as follows. Are you ready for this, Larry?
I'm ready.
All right. And it goes like this. Every pause will be the next chapter, but please continue on thinking of these as separate in your minds, guys. Because, again, this theater of the mind, little audio. So, here we go. Viewpoints, character and development, expanded horizons, breaking away, Russian saga, back in the USA, Lee and Marina, Marina and Lee, a turn to activism, New Orleans, Oswald entangled, Oswald's agenda, Mexico City, Oswald and the CIA. November 22nd / alternative views, DRE backstory, independent action, Oswald and Miami Cubans, Oswald and New Orleans Cubans, framing Oswald, under the influence, and then the epilogue. And the only thing I added in there is, and then the epilogue. Okay, the epilogue is there, but the and then is all me. So aside from that, and I'll put that exactly, I'll give you the chapters here in the Ochelli chat room. I don't know if I'll include them in the text of the podcast, but possibly I will. Why not? We can put it in the show notes, Larry, if that's okay with you.
Oh, that's fine.
But here are the chapters as presented, and they're in the live Ochelli chat room. For those of you that, might have missed something, you can also rewind it. But that, to me, lays out the narrative, although I still claim that we could break just before a turn to activism and end at Oswald and the CIA, and that is your middle section here, and you could break it into three. But and you could probably do it without the photographs, honestly, and still break it into three, and you have a very, very logical, step-by-step walk through the guy who is Lee Harvey Oswald. And it is a puzzle. It's still, look, as much as you've assembled here, Larry, you must say it still resembles a puzzle as opposed to an entirely, completely filled in, absolutely perfect image in and of itself, right? You still have some holes in this image, would you say? Or do you think you've actually filled them all in?
Oh, certainly we have holes in terms of the second half of the book. Let's be realistic, looking at it from a historical perspective.
Beginning at November 22nd?
The first half of the book is well documented.
Okay.
I mean, we have all sorts of records. We have we have Oswald's own possessions, his own writing, characterizing Oswald historically as straightforward.
The stuff collected by the Dallas police, as well as things that have been collected afterwards, over the years even, right? The additional backyard photograph, et cetera, et cetera. All of that stuff that has been collected cumulatively over time documents the first half all the way up to, we get to November 22nd and alternative views, all the way up to that part. You're saying is very well documented photographically and otherwise, yes?
Yeah, and I have in my own mind, I have no problem with that being the correct story. One of the good points, and as with any history, we have Oswald in his own words, and fortunately Oswald wrote a lot. He made a lot of notes. He wrote a lot. He read a lot. We have all of that. It's impossible to think that that's all artificial. That is Oswald. Oswald being the cheapskate that you're talking about. Oswald saving the receipts for the books and magazines and subscriptions he ordered.
Absolutely.
And Oswald, for example, no, he's not going to buy something for the household, but he's sure going to pay the subscription for those newsletters he wants to read every month.
Right. So the worker,
that's a real person.
Right. The worker, and what was the other one? Actually, off the top of my head, I can't remember it.
The militant.
The militant. The worker and the militant, their subscriptions and renewals were certainly accounted for. If at any point in time they told him he had not paid for his subscription, he could probably provide them with a copy readily that he had, and which year would you like it from? Very simple. Now, the other thing is that some of his stuff, it's not like everything was meticulously kept in orderly fashion, because a lot of people would point to, well, gee, that was so weird that highlight receipt, from Mexico City turns up in a TV guide or whatever. To me, actually, as much as I don't believe Patricia and her story there, or whatever, Priscilla, what was her name? Priscilla, I always mix that up.
Priscilla McMillan.
Priscilla McMillan. Sorry. You know why I keep going to Patricia? Because of my ex-wife. And okay, sorry. Anyway, but Priscilla there, McMillan, finding this because she's living with Marina, right? And this is the evidence that pops up a long time later. People go, well, that's totally suspicious. Actually, in my mind, sometimes he didn't seem to be all that neat about this. He might have stuffed something like that into anything. It might be a bookmarker in his creative writing later, even though he's saving that receipt. It's not like everything was filed perfectly. You know what I mean?
Well, and also look at, it's not like Oswald has a home of his own, where I come home and I go to my office and my filing cabinet. Oswald is traveling.
My next point.
He's got multiple apartments he's living in. He's living at the YMCA. Then he goes over to the Paynes,
where he has his wife.
Who knows
and
where he's going to put something at the Paynes?
Right.
Marina has a bedroom that she sleeps in with the kids. His stuff is packed away in the, where do you expect stuff is going to end up?
Well, for better or worse, there's a whole book devoted to Mrs. Payne's garage, okay, for a reason, because he had a lot of stuff out there. I mean, so he's got stuff stored with his wife he's not living with. He's got stuff in his, in his brother's hands, looks like, at a certain point. His mom has some things. He's got stuff kind of spread everywhere in a way because his own permanent residence where he can reliably store. It's not like he can go, look, I'm going to buy a file cabinet and I'm going to put it where? Lee, where are you putting it? Because, you're moving from place to place. You're picking up your family. You went to New Orleans. You went back to Texas. What are we doing here? So he's got stuff that winds up spread around, not because he's trying to, but just based on circumstances as they emerge. Well, these things get packed up, and I don't know about you, but if you've ever had somebody assist you with packing your things when you've gone to move somewhere, there's a whole unpredictable level of where stuff can end up, right? So the idea that something might have been stuffed into a TV guide or whatever else, as much as I don't believe Priscilla about a lot of things she says, the idea that she could have run across this stuck in a book as a bookmarker, he could have flipped it over and decided to write a note on the back of it, and therefore it ends up somewhere entirely different. It's a highlight receipt, if I remember right. So it's not like this earth-shaking, significant thing that it got stuck somewhere weird. He's moving a lot, and so is his things. And, some things probably got lost, and some things got misplaced, and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, or am I making too much of this?
Oh, and if anyone's ever been through it, it's kind of strange that people think that it is strange. I mean, having moved overseas in the service, having left stuff with my brother, having left stuff with my wife's parents, my parents.
Yeah, he went to the military.
Back, moving into multiple different apartments, it kind of amazes me that I still have as much of my stuff as I do.
So he goes to the military. Another time when your stuff ends up somewhere where you are not. Okay? What do you have when you go into the military? Whatever's in your footlocker or whatever. You know what I'm saying? You have your uniforms, etc. And sure, you can acquire some personal items, but you go in there with nothing except, whatever's in a duffel bag you might be allowed. I don't remember. But the idea is you're not exactly going in there with the furnishings of your home and all of your books, et cetera, et cetera. You're limited. Okay, you're in a place where limited space is allowed for you, and you're there for a period of time, and he spent a period of time like that and was in Japan. We all know that. He's in Russia. He couldn't drag everything with him there. So all that travel, all of that uncertainty about where his home base is and where his things are going to be, I don't see how you can logically say that he reliably put anything anywhere based on all that. Maybe it's just me.
And another thing that we have, and again, something we try to do in the book very carefully, is corroboration.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if somebody said something about Lee Harvey Oswald, did somebody independently observe the same thing? And one of the things that proved very helpful is we've had some sources emerge over time. I became very good friends with a retired Marine named Jack Swyke, who served as a counterintelligence agent at Itsugi, where Oswald had served. He showed up a few months after Oswald had been there, but he had the opportunity to question lots of guys that had known Oswald, and they Marine to Marine, you know, not Warren Commission staffer to Marine, Marine to Marine.
Right.
He knew the protocols and procedures, how they handle things at Itsugi security-wise, how things went down in doing surveillance on the bars. Jack was a great source of information on procedures to give us an insight into Oswald. One of Jack's things that he pointed out to me and actually was that the Warren Commission, again, was very selective in what it interviewed a lot of Marines, but it was very selective in how they used their information. Something else, and you and I have talked about this, Ernst Tidowitz. Ernst Tidowitz's insights and being a close personal friend in Russia of Oswald when he was working in the factory, through his various relationship with women, his courting of Marina, knowing Marina quite well, knowing them after they got married. Again, when you can take different individuals and bring them together and go, you know, can I cross-check this stuff? Does it make sense, or is it out of sync? Was very helpful in the book, and that's something, again, actually the Warren Commission avoided doing, and to some extent so has conspiracy research. We tend to live in our own silo, right? If we see something that we find that's suspicious, that's what we want to see, right? We don't go, you know, check 3 other sources and, oh, did they see the same thing? Well, but the one advantage that we did in writing about Lee Harvey Oswald at this point in time is that we literally had a more comprehensive view that we could use to cross-check. And that was very helpful.
Right. So, look, I got a couple of sort of open questions that relate to the book. I'd like to get to those. And then I want to summarize this whole thing by handing it over to you and saying, Larry, what if I haven't already made the case for somebody who is interested in this topic to pick up this book, because it's going to be an essential piece of reading for you to catch up on a more evolved, more modern look with better information, evidence, photographic section, etc., at Lee Harvey Oswald. If I haven't made that case enough, I want you to make a case for why this book is unique, with a couple of minutes of a quick summary, if you don't mind. But before we go there, I have a couple of loose questions that do relate to the book and some of what we talked about, but might not have otherwise gotten asked, if you don't mind, that come from the live chat room.
No problem.
Okay, so quick question about photographs, and I don't know if you want to reveal something like this or not, but it's up to you. Does A.J. Weberman have exclusive photos still, or are they in Larry's book? Because apparently Weberman had some photographs that he was claiming exclusivity over for a while. Did you run into that issue with anything that you put into this to be published?
No, we literally could not. The publisher requires that we have legal permissions to use everything that we found, so we had to go. So the answer to the question is, I honestly don't know if Weberman still has anything exclusive that he hasn't shared, but no, we're not using anything from Weberman.
As far as you know. Nothing that is being used has anything to do with Weberman.
And anything that we're using certainly would not be exclusive to Weberman.
Okay. That's all I wanted to get at. Let's see. Oh, okay. About the unknown fingerprint, the infamous, for years, a lot of people said it was Mac Wallace's print. And quite honestly, to my satisfaction, Joan Mellon has quite well proven it is not. But putting that issue aside, since the unknown fingerprint on the 6th floor wasn't Mac Wallace's print, shouldn't someone have run that thing through codes or whatever the fingerprint software is? Seems like someone would be curious. So here's what the follow-up question is, I think, on this altogether, is, look, we all know this fingerprint exists. It's part of the evidence collection. Has anyone, to your knowledge, gone through and, I don't know, done an independent search to try and, we've disproven whose it might be, but has anyone gone through and said, can we find a match for this sucker somewhere in the computers?
And that would be the FBI's APHIS collection of fingerprints. One of the problems like that, and we ran into the same problem in the King case when Stu and I were working on that. The bottom line is you can't, if I have a photo, well, actually we do have fingerprints from the King assassination that would be very critical. Mm-hmm. However, I can't gain access to that FBI system unless I'm in law enforcement and unless it's an open case. Mm-hmm. Literally, I have to prove to access that database that I am officially in law enforcement investigating an open case, mm-hmm. which at that point in time, the King case was not. With the Open Record, the Closed Case Records Act, that may become a different story now that is moving forward on the King case, but certainly it can't be done on the JFK case unless some law enforcement agency was willing to open this up again, take those fingerprints and go to the FBI. Privately, you can't do it.
Well, I think,
I will say, give an expanded answer, though. It's not that question was never asked. Mm-hmm. In the fall of 1964, yes, before issuing its report, the Warren Commission and its staffers were very concerned about exactly that question. Mm-hmm. They went back to the FBI and basically said, what about all those other prints? Have you checked out those prints about everybody in the building, everybody, can you even match them to somebody else in the building? Is it possible somebody else was involved with this? Mm-hmm. They expressed that. The FBI went back to the Dallas police, and the response that the Dallas police officially gave them was, none of the other businesses in the building, the publishing companies, the book companies, are open to doing that. They're very unresponsive to doing that. Okay. They don't want to have their people fingerprinted. They don't want to do that. Okay, but it doesn't matter because, and Dallas police said this, that building was open to the public all weekend long. There were dozens and dozens of reporters and other people in that building, not touching but touching the book. The bookcases, that sort of thing. Mm. And so it would make it's useless. And basically that was the response that was given to the Warren Commission is, you're wasting your time. Anybody could have left those prints. Mm.
Okay.
And we have no way of contacting, and the Warren Commission let that stand. Because obviously one of the arguments is certainly in 1963, law enforcement did not have a fingerprint file on everybody. Right. Only those people,
No, that's one response. The other response is that, look, in the next 60 years, okay, somebody could have encouraged someone in law enforcement to just do this, especially
not
with the
that
greater.
We didn't try.
Well, that's the open question, right?
Yes, we did, and people got their hands slapped, and people got somebody may have better luck than Stu and I did.
I see. So what you're telling me is there are possibilities for people to encourage someone in the right position to maybe utilize the newer technology, but thus far, any attempts that you've been part of or privy to have been rebuffed quite fully, where it seems like no one actually wants to do it or let it proceed. Does that appear to be the case?
Literally take the risk of, they would be literally breaking the law.
Mm-hmm. But someone might think that that's, not that. I mean, how bad of a punishment?
It might be worth the risk. I can't, condone breaking the law.
No, nobody's condoning.
No one has volunteered to do that so far that I know of.
Right. Nobody is condoning that. I never do. I always make those statements like, look, an act of violence is never going to be encouraged by me, etc. Depending on the issue, I might say, I would never encourage somebody to risk their own freedom for any particular cause that they did not, you deem it necessary, you deem it a morally, significant thing, then that is a decision that you need to make for yourself if you're in the position to do so. But I would never encourage it openly. But I would say that if someone sought to do this, they might find themselves in a position, if they were able to resolve something by this action, of not being worthy of prosecution or not being prosecuted for solving something here. I'm just saying. But again, legally, the normal channels, etc., this has not been an option so far. Is that about right?
I do think that it's interesting that even the Warren Commission itself realized that it was an issue.
Mm-hmm.
That's considering all the things that they didn't realize were issues. I think it was interesting that they at least tweaked to that one.
Mm. Yeah, the chat. I have a chatter saying no one checked that print, but if you do, ... Yeah, that's
let us know. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be more than happy to accept the press release from said action, because that wouldn't make me liable for anything for sure if I simply accepted a press release from someone who was able to prove that the proper investigation was done here and it revealed so on and so forth, hypothetically. And it does seem like something that other JFK researchers might have attempted to do, because different people have done different things to try and investigate this fingerprint before, and they've come up with various results. So I'm just thinking, this is one of those things, given the evolution in technology, one might think is not a particularly laborious task to undertake, and would just require proper access and, and the ability to handle the thing, no? Anyway, I leave it to the listener to think about that. Larry, not trying to put you in any position, and again, I would never endorse somebody breaking the law and putting their own liberty in jeopardy for any particular reason. That's not for me to encourage. Very simple.
I do think that. Yeah. I do think I'm fascinated by the subject as well, but I kind of do think that the problem would be, and the fingerprint base is bigger now, obviously right. Far bigger than it ever was then.
Right.
So your options, your likelihood of coming up with someone would be far better now, just because more prints have been collected over the subsequent decades. But it kind of. It appalled me when I read the Dallas police saying, well, it's a waste of time because we left the crime scene totally open and all these people marched all over the place and did whatever. So it's kind of like, did you guys not think that was a bad idea? I guess they didn't have yellow tape back then.
Well, they did shut down the building for a little while, right? But
well, they did, but not overnight. My friend Ian Briggs, who has passed, interviewed people that worked in the publishing houses there, the book right. companies, mm-hmm. and those guys said, well, I was out of town and I came back and, Saturday night, Sunday, I went into my office, I went into our regular door and nothing was locked. There was nobody around. I just wandered around.
Yeah. Yeah, but nonetheless, there might have been a point at which if they had done... See, that's the question. Did they do a full... See, because if a full collection was done, say by Saturday, and they were done Saturday afternoon with that collection, and they let the building open at some point right after that, then one could say, look, we have a snapshot in time where there was prints collected that could not have existed previously and would not be added to by all the additional traffic over the weekend, right?
If they had done that, of course, a fellow that I interviewed and talked to personally, Tom Alyea, maintained strongly and offered some pretty interesting evidence to prove it, that the Dallas crime scene photos of all those boxes were actually not taken on November 22nd.
Right.
That Studebaker's assistant was brand new, didn't know how to do anything. He moved all the boxes around, took his pictures, and they had to restage all those shots on Saturday. And I think that's a fascinating thing because, again, you want to drive yourself nuts. Just Alia said that the boxes in the official crime scene photos are not stacked the way he saw them the afternoon of the 22nd.
Right. And for the record, Allier is one of the guys who took a film and is responsible for the film inside the book depository at the time that the search was being conducted for the rifle, for the shooter, etc. He's the guy who actually had to throw his film out of a window in order to get it to one of the television stations so they could broadcast a look inside of the school book depository and the search. That's the guy we're talking about here, Tom Elliott, yeah?
I thought it was fascinating. I talked to Tom at length many times, and Tom was a lone nut believer. He believed Oswald did it by himself.
Oh, yeah.
And Tom, we'd have this conversation. It's kind of like, Tom, so you're telling me that all the crime scene photos and evidence are faked? You're telling me that they threw the shells, the holes back on the floor, and those aren't really the way they were after the shooting, yet you believe everything else in the Dallas police evidence file?
Yeah.
And he would just look at me with this look like, and I would go, well, I paid for lunch, so okay. But I thought it's a wonderful thing to believe what you want to believe. Like, Tom, you're telling me it's bogus, but you believe everything was right except that. Okay.
Yeah, part of the basic evidence package is BS, but they got it right anyway. That's interesting. Also, what's interesting is, what was it, maybe 2004, I'm thinking now, I might have this off, but a book was released called First Day Evidence. And are you familiar with it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so could you give a basic description of what was in that book that goes along with this story just real fast?
Basically, as I recall it, the individual that published the book was the nephew of a Dallas police officer who had been in the photographic unit and had taken a lot of pictures of the crime scene evidence and had made copies for friends and scattered them around. But one of the essential points was that some of the pictures that he had taken of prints were good enough, and this nephew had come into possession of them, that a forensics expert could take a look at them. And I think he said, he was maintaining it was solid evidence of Oswald because there were 11 points of match, which is actually a pretty low number for court proof. But again, and this is, interestingly enough, something we do cover in the book, is the terrible handling of crime scene evidence by the Dallas unit, and particularly photographs.
Right.
We talk about that a lot because it's very germane to the discussion of the well-known backyard photo there. So, but yeah, first day evidence was essentially, my uncle took a lot of pictures. He saved a lot of them. I got them. And by the way, I can now prove that it was Oswald because of my uncle's pictures. Now, not that his uncle's pictures that would have proved that apparently were used by the Warren Commission or the Dallas police or anything like that. It's like, okay, that didn't happen as part of the official process, but now you're saying you can do it with pictures that he kept and you inherited. Great.
Well, and the other part of this was, look, not only was it stored away for, at that time, 30 years plus, right? Because taking a look at this, it was actually first published in 93. I was mixing it up. I was thinking 2004. It was in my hands by 1994. So my mistake there. But it kind of coincided with all of the excitement over the JFK film, first of all. And secondly, it appeared to me to be the most ardent defense of the idea that there was a print, because in the film, if you recall, there was this allegation sort of given to us that maybe Oswald had been printed in the morgue in order to place part of a palm print on the rifle. The palm print not being present when the FBI took all the evidence from Dallas, I believe, the night of the assassination, right?
Right, by midnight.
By midnight, they had already taken all this stuff, so they arrest Oswald in the early afternoon, and they're sending all the evidence to the FBI that they have, supposedly, and that means the guns, the shells, everything. They're shipping to the FBI to be shipped back to them.
Except that the one shell Day decided to keep in his desk drawer.
Yeah.
For some reason.
Desk drawer or file drawer, something like that. That's another story. But let's put that aside. The thing is that this was a defense of the idea that the palm print had to have existed before Oswald was in the morgue, because his uncle, even though he didn't send it to them that night, had the good photograph. He had already lifted the palm print, right? So his lift was what they already had, but they didn't send that to the FBI.
This would have been so much fun in court.
Well, of course it would have, but I mean, you do recall this part of it, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And this was the big controversy. And by the way, I think this book is kind of hard to get, or at least was for a time. Maybe it's a little easier to get. I don't think it had additional printings. But it might have. It might have. And the author was Gary Savage, just saying. But what was it called? Let's see, the full title. JFK First Day Evidence stored away for 30 years in an old briefcase. No kidding. This is what it says. New evidence is now revealed by former Dallas Police Crime Laboratory lab detective, R.W., and then I guess the description continues. R.W.
Subtitle is Why You Should Trust the Dallas Police Force.
It should be, exactly, right? Why should you trust him? Well, he just happened to have this lift, and he did have the palm print in his possession before Oswald could have ended up in the morgue, and you see what you see in JFK. There were a bunch of counter-narrative books released at this time, just for the record, for the audience. Okay, but just saying. Let's see. On the TV show, Van Best, about 5 years ago, they had a real film from the Dallas PD of all the evidence. Yeah, there was a film. There were a few things. There was a reel of stuff that was on like a microfilm that was supposed to be all of Dallas's evidence that they tried to sell to that Pawn Stars group of guys in Las Vegas. And apparently there was another film allegedly of all the evidence in Dallas that was on a TV show.
A lot of that is online. We went through like 44 pages of photographs of evidence that materials taken from Lee Harvey Oswald.
Right.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of it online now, actually.
Yeah, a lot of stuff is available online. I mean, you can see the one that cracked me up is the one that's got his flip-flops and like everything that they collected, like the junk in his pockets, was pretty much revealed in these photographs that they staged. Kind of wild because, again, it doesn't look very organized for the crime lab guys to...
No. It's not organized at all.
Just saying.
They're as bad as Oswald. It's like, man, at least you guys captured his true nature here because it's all intermixed.
Right.
Pictures from Russia are side by side with, private possessions.
Exactly.
It's all intermixed.
It's a whole big grab bag of stuff that it looks like they kind of dumped out and spread out a little bit, like here's how we'll separate it a little bit. But I mean, even the flip-flops are not they're not placed in a place that makes sense. It isn't even meant to be aesthetically balanced or anything. It's just, here's the stuff from this bag, okay, next bag, here's the stuff from right. And it was like, wow, I can't believe that this stuff was collected like this and people. But meanwhile, you're supposed to take it very seriously that his uncle had this lift, which I don't know if anybody can prove when it was actually taken, if anything's dated properly. I don't remember all that, but I do remember looking at it saying, this is the best they can do. to defend this, this idea, because people were shook up about the idea that Oswald may have been printed post-mortem. Okay. Anyway, Larry, look, we've run a little extra time, more than I wanted to, but I'm sure you could give us a very concise sort of statement about, listen, Larry, I've bought and I've read lots of Oswald stuff, and you know what? A lot of it is repetitious. We've already been over how photographs are different. This is laid out in a different way. The narrative is fresh. We've already told him that, but give me one more little push. What is the reason why, if I've got a collection of books on Lee Harvey Oswald, besides the Arts and Crafts project I presented earlier, what is the reason why, Larry, and I hate to do this to you, I need to buy this book by Larry Hancock and David Boylan, because I got to add to my collection for references, because I'm seriously, Oswald Puzzle, okay, which is just how it's named on Amazon. Oswald Puzzle hardcover, says it's to be released January 14, but you can pre-order it now by Larry Joe Hancock. I like how they give you the three names here. Larry Joe Hancock, okay. Some people make a big deal out of this. This guy, they always name him by three names when they're this or that. No, they just, it's your, but you're Larry Joe Hancock here, Larry. David Boylan's just David Boylan. But anyway, the two authors on Oswald Puzzle, which has this black and white photo of Oswald with this ghostly overlay of other photos of interest, that definitely suggests to me the first half of the book for sure, as far as the biographical presentation that could be had from the supposed first section of that narrative that we've already read from. So give us the reason, Larry. Why is it I need to add this book to my collection? How does it round it out? What does it do?
Well, I think there are really three parts to it, Chuck. The first is it tackles three standing questions that I've always had. I think most everybody has always had. Basically, what was Oswald? What was his belief system? What was he left? Was he right? Was he a tool? Was he independent? We come down with answers to all those questions. You can like them, you can not like them, but we come down with a very, I think, well-supported view of who he really was and what was his personal agenda. Okay? No ifs, ands, or buts. We take a very definitive position. The second is there have been a very fundamental series of questions of, was Oswald acting for someone? Was he an asset? Was he, what is really going on with him? We get very definitive about that. Was he FBI? Was he CIA? Was he, how? And you read off the chapter of Oswald's entanglement. We used entanglement for a very specific reason, and bring that out in the book, how Oswald became entangled with a lot of things that made him look a particular way when he may not have been. So we tackle those questions head on in terms of Oswald and the CIA, the FBI. We tackle the hard issues like the Walker incident, the backyard photo, Mexico City, Russia. We tackle those and we give answers, which we think are well defensible and balanced. So that's the second thing, is a lot of that has been kind of discussed a speculative fashion. We're going to we take a firm position on those things in the book. But the third thing is the big question of what was Oswald really thinking, and what was Oswald doing on November 22nd? And there have been many things that have been offered for that. Things like, was he a participant? Was he an unwitting participant? Was there a false flag operation going on? Was he totally framed? And if he was totally framed and totally clueless, how do you explain some of his rather strange behavior on November 22nd? And the second half of the book is an explanation for what we feel he really was thinking on that day, and how it came about over the 90 to 120 days period in advance of that day in Dallas. So I think the bottom line is you're going to see things in the book that solid positions that have been discussed, and they're going to be supported with information. Some of it simply organized in a more structured fashion. Some of it brand new. And I have, you've been good. You haven't asked me what is brand new in the book, which I wouldn't say because, my publisher would go, "What are you doing?
Why are you giving that away?" Yeah.
There is brand new data in the book. Some of it discovered when we were working the photo section, which is going to be rather fascinating because it was there in front of us all the time. It's there in the Warren Commission report. It's there in the photos, and we never saw it. I never saw it. So there is new content in the book as well, that I can guarantee. Whether people like it or not, that's another story, but it is new. So those are multiple reasons. It is one thing that it will offer. It has 436 endnotes. The majority of those are linked to source material, and in some cases to contrarian source material. So you can go take this book, see what we think, see what our assessment is, and then go look at what the other people say. So actually it would be a very good starter book for someone that's relatively new to this and doesn't want to totally believe anybody. And that would be our answer is, hey, go look at the other viewpoints and you make the choice.
And on the other hand, it would be excellent for someone who has gotten fully entrenched in some of the things of the past, whether they are on the conspiracy advocacy side or they are on the lone nut belief side. Either way, you can gain a new insight here and get new information. And nobody's necessarily looking to support a particular agenda, apparently. Let's take an objective view with some context here, whether it's in the photographic section or point by point through the entire one-piece narrative of the Oswald puzzle. Is that right?
Yeah. Our goal was to be objective with it. And it's not, I think, longtime conspiracy folks will find it interesting, in some aspects annoying, because it does deal with some sacred cows. But we wrote it to be more of a book for the general public. That if you've never really waded into this and always wondered if the Warren Commission told you the real story, you need to read this. And no, they didn't.
But as per usual, Larry, no matter what your intent was as an author, things do have a life of their own once you release them. So I would say this thing is definitely going to have a life, and I'm wondering how pleasant or miserable it might be, not for it in and of itself, but for the reader. Depending on your preconceived notions, you could have a hard time with this thing. You could have an easy time with this thing, but one way or another, it's going to be a unique experience. So we'll leave it at that. Larry Hancock was my guest for more than an hour. Let's see, nearly an hour and a half, hour and 20 plus on the Ochelli Effect. I urge you to go to larry-hancock.com and keep up with his work, not just his books, which you can find references and portals to. I, by the way, recommend all of them. Matter of fact, one of the very, very few times that I have appeared on Amazon, I have a little book blurb, if you will, on one of Larry's books on Amazon. Why? Because I highly recommend not only that book, which I wrote something for, which I was asked to do, but you know what? I recommend all of it, regardless of what you see written anywhere at any time. So, Larry Hancock, larry-hancock.com. That's the place to go. Follow his work. And
Revelation through conversation.
In Denial, Secret Wars with Airstrikes and Tanks by Larry Hancock. Secret wars became a staple of U.S. covert operations and are still happening today. Larry Hancock's book, In Denial, rips the cover off many of them. Using new files, it exposes things about the Bay of Pigs that no one has ever written about before. It shows why it really failed and why the United States did not learn from it. It also shows why other countries today are doing secret operations with more success. This is the book that puts what some want to deny into the light. In Denial, Secret Wars with Airstrikes and Tanks. Larry Hancock. For more information, go to larry-hancock.com. Pick up your copy of In Denial at amazon.com in digital or physical form.
Yo, this is Doug Campbell, host of the Dallas Action Podcast presented by Wall Street Window. And you are listening to the Ochelli Effect. Revelation through conversation.
Go ahead, caller.
I'm interested in the truth about the JFK assassination.
Right. Well, what do you want to know?
Judy Baker's wild claim, Oswald girlfriend, she knew Ruby and Barry, cancer weapons. Really?
I imagine I could claim I have 4 wheels. It doesn't make me a wagon, but okay.
Oswald was on the kill team and trying to prevent the murder of John Kennedy. Come on now. Has a real expert on the JFK assassination looked into her claims?
Go to amazon.com, enter Judith Baker in her own words. You'll get results for a digital copy of a book where Walt Brown utilizes her own words and the known evidence in the case to get at, well, a different perspective, let's say. You can get Judith Barry Baker in her own words from the author himself, signed if you request it by contacting Dr. Brown at KIASJFK@AOL.com. It's a fun book and it actually dissects the many, many fantastic claims. Judith Barry Baker in her own words.
Thank you for all the great information.
The views expressed by callers, co-hosts, or anyone else who happens to get on the air at Ochelli.com do not necessarily reflect the views of Ochelli.com or Chuck Ochelli, and we are not responsible for any stupidity which might ensue. Thank you.
Revelation through conversation.
The War State by Michael Swanson explains the great national transformation that took place and put the Kennedy presidency in the context of the times and reveals never-before published information about the Cuban Missile Crisis. President Kennedy would not have been assassinated if he had been president 200 years ago. His assassination took place in the context of the Cold War and the rise of the national security state. Before World War II, the United States was a continental republic. In the decade that followed, it became an imperial superpower. Generals such as Curtis LeMay not only wanted to invade Cuba, but knew that there were short-range missiles on the island armed with nuclear warheads that they could not destroy because they were on mobile launchers. Their invasion could have led to a third world war, and they wanted to go to war anyway. The War State by Michael Swanson reveals why and will show you what President Kennedy was up against. For more information, thewarstate.com.
This is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com, and you're listening to the Ochelli Effect at Ochelli.com.
In Denial, Secret Wars with Airstrikes and Tanks by Larry Hancock. Secret wars became a staple of U.S. covert operations and are still happening today. Larry Hancock's book, In Denial, rips the cover off many of them. Using new files, it exposes things about the Bay of Pigs that no one has ever written about before. It shows why it really failed and why the United States did not learn from it. It also shows why other countries today are doing secret operations with more success. This is the book that puts what some want to deny into the light. In Denial, Secret Wars with Airstrikes and Tanks. Larry Hancock. For more information, go to larry-hancock.com. Pick up your copy of In Denial at amazon.com in digital or physical form.
Ochelli.com. Do you like history? Real history that you were never taught in schools? Why? The Vietnam War, nuclear bombs and nation building in Southeast Asia. By author Mike Swanson, with new documentation never seen before. That'll open your eyes to events that led up to this. Why? The Vietnam War, nuclear bombs and nation building in Southeast Asia. 1945 through 1961. Get your copy today at Amazon.com. Why? The Vietnam War by author Mike Swanson.
The Ochelli.com radio network.
the Ochelli.com radio network.
Ochelli.com.
Yo, this is Doug Campbell, host of the Dallas Action Podcast, presented by Wall Street Window. And you are listening to the Ochelli Effect, Revelation through Conversation.